Philip Turle from our International Affairs Desk is with me now. Philip, why this announcement now?
Well, that is a very good question, Stuart, which I think many are trying to work out as to exactly what is going on in the United States and what the final end game is as far as Donald Trump is concerned with Venezuela. Remember, we've seen a switch from originally firing on boats in the region. Then we've seen ships that have been seized. There are rumors going around that there's also regime change in the air from the part of the U.S. administration. If you look at the message that Donald Trump has posted on his Truth Social, it's quite long and detailed. It says, Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. He says it will only get bigger and the shock to them will be nothing like they've ever seen before until such time as they return to the United States of America all the oil, land and other assets that they previously stole from us. But he hasn't really gone into any detail about what that actually means. And at the same time, there is a feeling, I think, in Washington of this cover-up over the firing on boats, fishing boats in the Caribbean and the East Pacific. 25 have been hit so far. About 95 people have been killed. There is this film, this video of one of the boats being hit. You get the original video, but you don't get the second video, which the authorities have refused to release for the moment. And that is presumably because of the fact that Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary of the US, is reported to have said kill all those on board, and if that is the case, then that it could also be affiliated as being a war crime. So a lot of unanswered questions, but Trump is basically accusing Venezuela of three things: using oil to fund drug trafficking and other crimes, including human trafficking. He's vowed to continue the military build-up around Venezuela and also wants the return of oil, land and assets, as I was saying, that belongs to the United States.
Give us more then on the reaction from Venezuela.
Well, you've seen the reaction there just now of Nicolás Maduro saying it was basically grotesque, utterly irrational, this oil blockade to steal riches, and affirms Venezuela is confirming its legitimacy over its oil fields. Just to give you some perspective about where this oil goes and who is going to profit from it, there are about 850,000 barrels produced every day in Venezuela. China has about 81% of that oil shipped to its country. The United States takes about 17% through the Chevron Corporation, and about between 2 and 5% goes to Cuba. So a lot of people are saying, well, isn't this pretty obvious that Donald Trump wants to get his hands on that oil so that he can stop the influence of China in the region? There is also another question that has been raised just in the last few hours by the US Congressman Joaquin Castro, who's a Democrat. He says the naval blockade is unquestionably an act of war. US lawmakers will on Thursday vote on a resolution directing the president to end the hostilities in Venezuela. And that, I think, is once again raising the questions about the whole legality of what Donald Trump is doing here.
That raises questions about the legality. What about questions about whether there's some kind of bigger regional plan here that Trump's,
and that is probably, I think, one of the most interesting questions here. As I said, there's a large quantity. Most of the oil goes to China. Is this an attempt by the Trump administration to undermine oil exports to China and China's influence in Latin America? That question has to be asked. Does Donald Trump want to install a like-minded regime in Venezuela, a regime that would be more sympathetic towards Donald Trump and play into the hands of the United States, a bit like we've seen in Honduras, in Argentina, and just in the past few days in Chile? And also this desire by the United States to reactivate, which is called the Monroe Doctrine, which is a 19th century plan which basically ushers in an era of Washington interventionism in Latin America, treating Latin America a bit like the United States' backyard, and it's the United States that decides what goes on there, who runs the countries there. This was described by the former US Secretary of State John Kerry as dead and buried, but it looks like Donald Trump has decided to resurrect that and to try to exert his influence over countries that he believes could be more useful to the United States, and certainly at the moment are perceived as being not useful at all in the case of Nicolás Maduro. And what Donald Trump wants to do is to neutralize drug cartels and transnational crime, and also he wants to stop the influx of illegal immigration into the United States. And many say that those illegal immigrants are coming in from Venezuela, and that's why Donald Trump wants to get rid of the Maduro regime so that he can stop those illegal immigrants coming into the US. So a lot of different policies that Donald Trump could be working on. We don't know exactly what policy that means, but there's one other thing which I think is quite interesting to draw up in all of this, and that is Susie Wiles, who's Donald Trump's chief of staff at the White House. She's been talking to the magazine Vanity Fair, and she said basically that all of this is part of a plan by Donald Trump to oust Nicolás Maduro. Don't have to look any further than that, because she said Trump wants to keep on blowing up boats until Maduro cries what she says, uncle. That's to say that he is going to quit power. And in a phone call that Donald Trump had with Nicolás Maduro in November, he's reported to have given the Venezuelan president free passage out of the country, but to leave pretty rapidly. That is something that Nicolás Maduro, of course, has turned down.
Philip, thanks very much for the tale from our international affairs editor there.